Hello guys, David Vose here. Boy, is it a hot day today. Hardly any clouds. I got up to about 80, I guess, which isn't that bad, but it's the first time I've seen the sun that hot, so far. And it's a beautiful day. The puppies are all lying under a tree somewhere or under the trailer, trying to keep cool. Well, I got some things I want to share with you today about astronomy. Now, this blows my mind because it's weird how you can know things, but no one, for some reason, ever puts it all together so that you really know just how much you don't know. Like, have you ever thought about what we don't actually know about what we say we know about the stars? I mean, how many different things can you point out that they say we know about the stars and the moons and the planets and all of this outer space that we can't demonstrate to us peasants? That they got a little formula somewhere, or they claim there's a gamma ray machine or some little particles of light they're bumping into each other under the ground, deep down to the ground at CERN, but we don't know if that's actually true. We don't know if nuclear is a real thing. They just say it is. They scare us ever so often. They tell us the fish all died in the Fukushima. Well, really? The fish all died? I mean, that would be a catastrophe. Unheard of. But it never seemed to materialize. We still got fish in the ocean. Have you ever wondered if they told us that this radiation went into the ocean and killed all the fish, or at least poisoned all the fish, so that you wouldn't want to buy the fish anymore? Because it's so healthy and it's the most amazing thing. It's plentiful. And you could just go out there and fish and you'd be having all the food you needed. But no. It might be poison. We can't eat the fish, so we've got to go get the Monsanto poison to eat. We've got to get the genetically modified foods and the farmed fish. So, in other words, they don't have to go fishing. It's probably a lot cheaper. They could just farm it and sell it to us, and it's not even real food. Maybe it's a marketing plan. You know how you hear all over the internet, YouTube or whatever, the TikTok and the, Tucker Carlson saying it. Everybody's saying it, that you can't drink the water because there's fluoride and chlorine and it'll kill you and it'll calcify your pineal gland and all this stuff. And look, I have no doubt that's probably all true. But think about it. What if it's not even true? Wouldn't you think that if it were true, they wouldn't have allowed us to even know about it? But they let us know all about this stuff. Maybe they're just trying to sell bottled water. Think about it. What a plan. Oh man, this is just genius. $1 for a little bottle of water. It's cheaper than soda pop. Oh man, we could just be being fooled. And then if we're being fooled about things like that, and the reason for our being fooled is so they can make money off of us. Of course, I'm sure they are poisonous as well, because that keeps us sick, and then they can sell us pharmaceutical drugs as well and make us dependent on them. So there's lots of reasons. But man, this rabbit hole that I'm about to show you is deep. Chernobyl went off. According to them, we couldn't go back for over 1,000 years. Well, there's people living there now. Japan, Nagasaki, it's all the same thing. There's grass. There's no two-headed snakes everywhere. Come on, it's pretty normal. Things started regrowing and everything looks normal after just 1 year, 2 years. You say, well, what was that big bomb that they dropped over there? Well, it could have just been a big bomb. Heat itself is radiation. We're scared of radiation. What is radiation? It's heat. And every radio wave has other dimensional waves. You can measure any wave in any kind of scale you want. There's light in a wave. There's radiation or radon. There's gamma. There's all microwaves. There's sound waves. There's light waves. There's all kinds of waves. And they're all going on simultaneously everywhere. So I think they're lying to us about a bunch of things. And I want to share with you some things that you probably heard, but we're going to kind of put them all together, and it'll blow your mind because it reveals that we're being lied to on a massive scale. And we have to ask ourselves, what do we really know? Look at this. This is the National Academy of Sciences. And it starts off by saying, are there other planetary systems like ours? Well, that's a pretty simple question. And if you could see planets visibly with telescopes or any other possible means, then the answer to that would be clearly yes, there are other planetary systems. But their answer is almost certainly yes. Not certainly. Why? Because we've never seen it. They're just speculating. Nearly every star in the night sky is likely to have planets around it. Now, why is that likely? You begin to see that if these things that they tell us are not true, even one or two of these things, it's like their entire science falls like a house of cards. So we're assuming that stars are just like the sun, which has planets. Now, there may be things there that we don't know. Maybe we don't actually know that the planets that we see are all rotating around the sun. However, I think that could be proven. It's likely for me that that could be proven because we can see with the naked eye the planets, and we see the sun, and perhaps we could, use trigonometry and geometry and different things. But if we cannot actually see planets circling around stars, then not only do we not know if there are planetary systems around stars for sure, because it doesn't say so in the Bible either. It doesn't say, there's not any record of other planets around other stars. I don't think there's a scripture in any ancient text that says that stars are just like the sun with rotating planets. But we've just assumed that that's what they are because that's what we've been told. But it says almost certainly they are. We assume, we speculate that they are. Surely, because all of our other information must be true that we're using to speculate with. Oh, really? Perhaps 90% of everything that they use to speculate is not even literally true. Maybe we don't know if any of it's true. It's like saying, look, I want to build a house, but I'm going to have a hammer, a saw, and a drill, and a plumb line, and a measuring tape, and a level. All right, now we have to build this house square, and, it'll fall down if it's not done properly. So we're going to have a level. We're going to have a square, right? Because if it ain't perfectly square, then it might start leaning. We're going to have a hammer. We can't get any nails in the board. So if you're missing any of these tools, even one of these tools, you're not going to build a house. If you're missing a hammer, you're not going to build a house. You're missing a saw, you're not going to build a house. If you're missing the level, you're not going to build a house. If you're missing the nails, if you're missing the boards, just one of the many things you need. So if all of our knowledge of science is built upon things that we assume we know, like we don't know if there are planetary systems. We don't know that for sure. We're speculating. It's almost certain. But we don't know. What if it's not? Then we don't even know what a star is. Right? If we can't see the planets around these stars, we're probably not seeing very much of a star other than a flash of white light. It could be a hole in the black tarp or dome around us. I doubt that. So, even the concept of a planet might come in question. I know that the Sumerian tablets and other books, even the Bible, talk about planets. I mean, the morning star, we assume that's a planet. Well, we're assuming a lot. But you see, it says astronomers don't yet know for certain if any of those planetary systems are like ours. But they hope to find out soon. Oh, well, I thought you had telescopes that could tell you whether there was water on the nearest planet or the nearest star planetary system. You guys have been telling everybody that you can see water on the planet, right? I mean, look, do you know how far Saturn is and Jupiter? They're claiming they can see these planets there, or these moons around Jupiter and Saturn, and they've got pictures floating around where there's this big lake on one of these moons. Well, it's like 1 trillion miles. It's like almost a light year to the end of the furthest planet out from the sun. And that's not that much further to the next first star. So if we can't see any planets going around the other star, I mean, look, if the planets are 1 trillion miles away from whatever sun they're orbiting, and the next planet out is probably a lot bigger than our sun, then its orbit is like trillions of miles. So it may, on one of its orbits, come fairly close to our solar system. And we should be able to see if there's planets or view the planet. But see, we can't really view pictures of any of these moons or any of these planets. So we don't really even know if it's true. Now, it says they have other methods. It depends on the method used. Seeing a planet orbiting even the star nearest to the Earth by direct imaging, detecting the light reflected off of it, or the infrared radiation emitted by it. So they can't even see a physical picture of it beyond any doubt. They don't see that. But maybe if you could detect some little glimmer of light. Well, what if it's a gas? Or what if it's some other phenomenon? What if it's some ether around the star or whatever it is, and it's glimmering? And how do we know that's a planet? Or they might use infrared radiation. We don't even know what they're talking about. So how could we even verify any of this? In any of the concepts that we peasants might have, it's just we take it on faith. A solar type star, that is, a star that's similar to the sun. Well, we don't even know if they're stars, right? So how would we know if there's any of them that are similar to the sun? And if some of them aren't similar to the sun, then what are they? Well, it's 1 billion times brighter than a planet like Earth, making planets hard to spot. But telescopes and the methods of processing the astronomical data they collect have become so sophisticated that they can do this and more. So we've got these other means other than actually seeing it or getting reflections of like infrared or light reflections or glimmers of light. You know, that right there is speculation. But they got something even better. They can't do that. They can't do the actual. But there's something else, but they can't tell you. That's a secret, what they do, right? It's gamma rays. What's a gamma ray? Well, I don't know. Does it take gamma ray pictures? I guess so. But that's just speculation. Astronomers can detect planets in other ways besides direct imaging. For example, they can spot some of the wobbles the planets produce. You can't see the planet, but you can sure see the wobble. And they can see the planets wobble in the stars they orbit. I don't understand how you can't see that top, but you can see it wobble. Others are found because of a slight drop in light from stars when planets pass in front of them. A slight drop. I don't know. What if it's gases? Like, Saturn has rings. Maybe they're rings. We don't know. We have no clue. And then they don't even know how many planets there are. How many planets have we found? Well, if the planets are visible with telescopes, which evidently they're not, but if they were, wouldn't we have the ability to see them all? Right? You look out into space and there's the space, clear view, right? Through the space, you ought to be able to see if there's what is this thing? They're looking for other planets that they might not have found yet. Well, if they're, you say, well, maybe they're just looking for small ones. They can't see them very well. But you can see the stars and the little planets going around, and we can detect them with radiation and infrared and gamma and whatever. But we can't detect any planets, but we suspect maybe there is one. Another likely story. If there are any planets big enough to be called a planet, because even Pluto's not big enough to be called a planet, we can see that one. It's furthest one out, right? So if there's something further out, smaller than that, it wouldn't be a planet. It'd be something like a little rock. So no, there wouldn't be any other planets, period. Why they got to speculate? Maybe there is planets. Oh, it's behind the sun, right? So it's constantly on the other side of the sun. We can never see it. Another likely story. But anyway, these are the stories of our lives, right? It's a drama that we watch every day on television, and we believe these guys. So I looked up, can you see the moons of Saturn from a telescope? It says, yes, you can see Saturn's moons through a telescope. Even a 2-inch telescope can show Titan. Well, that's one moon. Saturn's brightest moon, which appears as a pinpoint of light. So how do we know it's a planet? Could just be a glare. We don't, I mean, I get it that that's probably makes sense. It's the little pinpoint of light might be some kind of a moon, like we have a moon. But think about it. If we can only see the moon from Earth, and we're assuming that Earth is a planet going around a star called the sun, but we're assuming that. And we see this big bright ball out there, and we're assuming that's a moon or something different than the sun. We really don't know what the sun is. It's a little bit brighter than the moon. But, lights can be really bright. They can blind you, or they can be really dull. You can even have a heating element that also does put off heat, and it's red or orange. So we don't really know what the sun is. We don't really know what the moon is. We just call it a moon, and we go, oh, it's a moon. But there's the only one we know of, except this little pinpoint of light around Saturn, this little pinpoints, and that's it. That's all you can see. It appears as a pinpoint of light with an orange tint. A 10-inch telescope can sometimes show up to 6 moons, and an 8-inch or larger telescope can make it easier to spot major moons like Rhea, Dione. Okay, but it says anyone who looks at Saturn through a telescope will notice at least one and possibly several pinpoints of light glimmering near the planet. Even a 60-millimeter 2-inch telescope will show Saturn's brightest moon. So these supposed moons are just pinpoints of light that most of them you can't even see. They're just little pinpoints of light. But we know they're moons, just like the one going around the Earth. And oh yeah, 1 or 2 of them, they've discovered water on there, right? By the way, we got a probe going out there taking pictures. It's been ongoing for years. It's already past Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. It's beyond Pluto now. Right. I'll show you here in a second why we absolutely can prove that's not true. Everything we're being told, you would think that the one thing we know for sure, we may not know what the speed of light is. They told us what that is, 186,000 miles per second. We may not know even the speed of sound, right? But I think we could probably gauge that. We could measure that, because sound's only 600 miles an hour, and we can fly airplanes faster than that. And I think they could probably gauge that. There's some things that I do think that they are telling the truth about. But we know so little about anything beyond the Earth, and yet we act like we know so much. So the only one thing we know beyond a doubt is there's a big bright ball that we call the sun that gives light and energy and heat to the Earth. And at nighttime you see the moon, and it's not nearly as bright. We don't know what it is. And we don't know if any of those little white specks out there, if we can't see them with our eyes or telescopes very well, we can't make out planets. And how are they saying, oh, we've made out that some of these are galaxies? So they've told us that there's galaxies beyond this galaxy, and they're some of the little stars. But they're telling us that they have figured out that they're little vortices out there. And by the way, this one will blow your living mind. Ever seen a picture of the Milky Way galaxy? They can tell you how many arms there are, the Orion and the Sagittarian arm, and they got it all down, right? They know how long and how far and how wide in light years, right? How they even know how fast light goes, I don't know. But, they measured light, right? But they got pictures. You've seen the pictures of the Milky Way. Remember that thing they told us about how when they were coming down off Apollo and landing on the moon, the eagle has landed or whatever. They're like, the question was, well, who was taking the picture when the guy's walking down the ladder or whatever it was to moonwalk? Who's taking the picture? Right? What is it, a Polaroid? It's a terrible picture. The flag's blowing in the wind. There ain't no wind on the moon or whatever. So it's the whole thing. The sand's blowing around in weird ways. You can see it's a movie set. But here's a more important question. We don't know who took the picture of Neil Armstrong or whoever it was that came down the ladder, but who's taking the picture of the galaxy? Like, you'd have to get way beyond the galaxy to get a picture of the galaxy. Seriously, think about it. Who took the picture of our entire galaxy? I mean, how do they know how many rungs it's got, or wheel spokes, or how large or wide or color, or any of it? How do they know? I guarantee. I'm going to tell you something. Here's a revelation for you. They don't know. And that picture that we call the Milky Way galaxy is an absolute lie. It's a hoax. And I challenge anybody to give me a very clear and concise explanation of how we know the exact dimensions and, well, not the dimensions. More importantly, how do we know what the galaxy looks like and how many spokes and how thick it is and where we are in this galaxy as compared to, but more importantly, just who got the picture? Who took that picture? Explain that to me, genius. Oh, and I got another one for you. Oh, this is gonna put a smile on your face. You know how they say that Einstein was like one of the smartest men ever lived? His IQ was like 190,000 or whatever. Well, the smartest man in the world has no idea what he's talking about. There's no way. He believes in these pictures of the galaxy, and he thinks it looks like that, and it's got 4 like little wheels or rivers coming out from the center, and it's this big and it's that long, and he knows all about this stuff. This genius. And it turns out the genius is either lying or has no clue. We're smarter than he is. Us peasants, we figured it out. Oh, buddy. Man. But we were talking about these galaxies, just like our little Milky Way galaxy. There's other galaxies, supposedly. Those little white dots you see, some of those are stars, and some of those are other galaxies far, far away. All right? Well, they look just about the same size as a star. So, if you're looking at a star and you're seeing a swirl, we don't know if that's something that, because if you're looking at an entire galaxy that far away and all you could see is a white spot, how would you know if it was a star or a galaxy? We just don't know. I think this is quite interesting because if we have accepted this hook, line, and sinker, everything, and yet we have no pictures or no, look, do they even say, okay, yeah, we can't see it, but there is a formula, 2/3 times 5, whatever, some kind of proof, right, that we've done in a machine, or they don't even give you any kind of theorem. They just say, we know that there are stars. Some of them are bigger than the sun by so many times. Some of them are slightly smaller. We got dwarf stars and red stars and what? We have no clue. At least they haven't written in any paragraph a simple explanation of how they know these things. They might say, oh, well, it's some kind of rigmarole. But we don't know what that is. Nobody can demonstrate any of it. They might just be lying. It seems like if it were true that stars are just like our sun and they're burning hydrogen and uranium nuclear explosions, and they know exactly the makeup of every star, and they know how they go through certain cycles. We've been here looking at this for a few hundred years. Maybe if you go back to Sumerians, Egyptians, we could say we've done this for 5,000-6,000 years. But supposedly they're telling us that these stars are billions and billions and billions of years old. So they couldn't have mapped it. We've never had a telescope that you could see it. The only thing that I know that they can do, I'll tell you a couple things. They can put a stick in the ground, and couple hundred miles away, they can put another stick in the ground and measure the shadows. And by this, they claim that they can prove the Earth is round. Well, we can prove the Earth is round from various other things. So yes, I do believe the Earth is round, and I do believe that for another reason, because we can look to the north and see the pole star, and it stays in the north. But around the equator, we have the astrological wheel, and it just goes around and around, and each of these astrological signs go around us. And so when you go to the South Pole, you can look at the southern pole, and it spins and it stays in the south. And you can turn back the other direction and see the astrological constellations going around. So that proves that we're either on some kind of a egg-shaped or ball-shaped thing. We can see that the moon is round. We can see the sun is round. But we only see one side of the moon. That's odd. That's peculiar. But that's about all we know. We see little white twinkly things. We can't really see moons. We don't know if there are moons. We don't know whether we should call the moon a moon or if we're just calling it a moon because that's its name. But that's it. How is it that they can calculate how fast the light travels? They say, look, we've got this big machine, a big box, and we shoot light beams and we can measure. How? We have to take their word for it that they can measure light. I know some scientists will come on and say, oh, Dave, I've done it 1,000 times. It's quite easy. You just take your pen and you... What? You can't tell me that they can measure light and how fast it travels if it's 186,000 miles per second. And somebody might say, well, wait a minute, Dave. What about that CERN thing? They can shoot beams into each other and find dark matter. This is pretty serious stuff they're doing. All right, this is what they talk about. This weird stuff about dark matter. Do you understand any of this? No, nobody does. Oh, I do, Dave. It's quantum physics, you see. And it's like, well, I've done videos on philosophical concepts and logic. And I love logic, and logic's amazing. But you can't, with just logic, figure out how fast light travels. You can't do it. Now, the other thing I've heard them say they use is geometry. Now, I know geometry only in this sense. If you have a point A and a point B and a point C, you can measure from A to B and from B to C, and therefore you can surmise what C to A, the distance between C and A or something. If you find the angle of AB, if you find that angle, then you can find the distance. But that would work for a triangle that's a foot by a foot or 100 miles by 100 miles, because we can get on the Earth and we can see something 100 miles away and make angles and measurements that way. But if you're looking into space at a speck, that is purportedly light years away. First of all, you don't know how far it is because you're supposed to use geometry to figure it out, but you can't use the geometry because we have no way of measuring how far it is. Oh no, Dave, we've got circular thinking. We just told you we know how fast light travels. And so if you know how fast light travels, then we just measure or gauge how long it takes the light to get from the star to Earth, and boom, you can calculate the distance. You'd have to calculate that for thousands of years. We can't do that. And besides, you haven't proved to me that you could even figure out how fast light travels. Like you've got a little box, a foot long. Maybe it's 1,000 feet long. And you're shooting particle beams and you're telling me you can figure out how fast they're going? You can't even see the particle beams. Oh yeah, but you got telescopes that are real small, like little bitty ant telescopes, right? Microscopes. Like what? Seriously? I'm sure somebody's gonna say, oh yeah, I've seen one, Dave. All right, but I still don't know how you figured out how fast light's going. And I don't know how you know how long it took the light to go from that star to here. How could you? We just assume that they've been telling us all this. Oh yeah, well, that makes sense. We'll just wait to see how long it takes for the light to get here. Huh? How do you measure how long it took the light to get here from a star? Well, Dave, it's 1,000 light years. You measure it by how many? What? How do you know it's 1,000 light years? You'd have to know how fast light travels, and then you'd have to know how far it is in miles. And you couldn't figure it out by saying it took that long for the light to get here because we couldn't sit here and measure it for thousands of years. I don't know how else to explain this. It's a lie. It's ridiculous. They're full of crap. Like I can go and measure from point A to point B on the Earth, and I can measure from point B to C and deduce what A to C is, maybe. But I can't go to a star to find out how the distance, and then find out the distance between that and the moon, and then triangulate. I can't do that because I don't know how far it is to the moon. Now, they might say, well, we figured out how far it is to the moon because we saw a little lighthouse across the ocean, which was 50 miles. And then we looked at the moon and we triangulated it with, some other lighthouse 50 miles in the other direction or something. I don't know. I know how they've explained it in the books that I've looked at. Back in the days of Newton and Galileo, they determined how far it was to the moon by triangulating the sun, the moon, and the earth. And then they can, with that information, triangulate between Venus or Mars or something. And they can keep doing this, and they've got, it's really simple. First of all, there was a guy named Eratosthenes who put 2 sticks in the ground and figured out the earth was round, but he also was able to measure and use geometry with these shadows, and he determined approximately the diameter of the earth. He was using a well when the sun would come up in the summer, the spring equinox, or when it would come up in the winter solstice or whatever, and he could measure different things with geometry. All right, I don't know, maybe. But really just ballpark figures. Now, Galileo is supposed to have figured out that it's about 210,000 miles to the moon. When in actuality, it's 240,000. So he's pretty close. That's if it actually is 240,000. That's what they're saying now. But how did Galileo figure out that it was about 210,000 miles? Well, he had to assume, he made an assumption that the moon was 2/7 the size of the Earth, or the diameter of the moon was 2/7 of the size. Well, according to the scientists today, the diameter of the Earth is 8,000 miles, and the diameter of the moon is 2,000 miles. So that would be 2/8. So he just assumed it. Now, I don't know how you could just assume something like that, but that's the story and they're sticking with it. But here's the thing. If I give you a geometric problem and I say, there's a triangle on the page. Now, I've got one corner A, one corner B, and one corner C, but I don't have the distance to any of them. How do you figure out the distance between A and B? You don't know how far it is between B and C or A and C, but I want you to figure out how far it is between A and B. I don't think that's a problem that can be solved. I'm pretty darn sure that you cannot solve that problem. As of right now, today, I haven't thought about it or looked into it enough to find out if it's really true that there's a possible way to triangulate with geometry and trigonometry or something and figure out how far it is to a star when it's trillions and trillions and trillions of miles. Like, this doesn't make any sense if it's light years away. So we hear a lot of things, but nobody's ever, in my entire lifetime, ever shown me that you can do it or proven any of this. We're told stories that we just believe, but they don't really explain anything. We're like, how did they invent electricity? Oh, well, Benjamin Franklin was flying a kite, and he got electrocuted. And he's like, oh, I could have had a V8. And now we know what electricity is because he had a kite. Well, that suffices it. We understand it now. That's how we figured it out. Oh, that's probably the same reason why Elon Musk is this genius and made electric cars. Nah, he's just a billionaire. He had nothing to do with any of it. I heard that he was thrown out of PayPal. They didn't even like him. And he just purchased the electric car company and the X and all this stuff, and he didn't know anything about it. It's just money. It's a financial deal. Okay, we hear stories about Tesla, all these amazing, brilliant things this old man did. How do we know? Maybe it's just a myth, a popular thing that they tell us, a parable, so that we won't ask too many questions. Well, how did they do that? Oh, well, Benjamin Franklin invented it with a kite. Oh, I get it. Okay, no more explanation needed. So, yeah, Galileo took a lucky guess on the diameter of the moon, and of course, the ancient Greek Eratosthenes already figured out with a couple of sticks that the diameter of the Earth was around 7,000 miles, which it isn't. It's actually 8,000. So he's guessing with the moon, and he's got an improper figure with the Earth, but it's close, and he determines that the moon is 210,000 miles away. Bang, that's how it happened. But let's just ignore that he had to assume or guess the diameter of the moon before he started. So he's got a triangle, and he's guessing one of the distances on one side of the triangle. And you can come out with the proper, this doesn't make sense. Everybody's always saying, we know how far it is to these stars, and we know there are galaxies, and we know what the moon is, and we know how many moons are around Saturn. And yet, oddly enough, we never stop to ask if there's any pictures of a moon. No, you'll see pictures today, AI-generated pictures, paintings. Why are they making these kinds of paintings and digital pictures, fake pictures, if they can actually see it? You'd say, well, yeah, if you got a picture through a telescope, all you'd see is a little speck of light, so that's not a picture. And then they say they have a probe that they sent out years ago, and now it's beyond Pluto, way beyond Pluto. And at the same time, they have told us that just beyond Pluto a little bit is this wall of fire. Whatever that means, right? Wall of fire. It's a radioactive area or whatever, and the temperatures there will melt any steel known to man. Gold, silver, lead, uranium, whatever, it'll just melt anything known to man. It's that hot. It's like flying some piece of metal into the sun. According to what they say the sun is, it would just melt. Well, aren't these probes metal? If they're not metal, what are they made out of? Paper? Whatever they're made out of, they would be burned up going through that intense heat. I've looked at a couple of articles where people are talking about this, but we doubt ourselves so much that even though we don't understand any of it, and we can't imagine how anybody could know this stuff, we almost virtually everybody just accepts whatever it is that they say. Look at this. Astronomers find water on an exoplanet. If you don't know what an exoplanet is, don't worry, I don't either. Twice the size of Earth. Water vapor in the skies of the world K2-18b may make it the best candidate for habitability presently known beyond our solar system. 20 years ago, almost to the day, two competing teams of astronomers independently discovered the first known transiting exoplanet, a world that, viewed from Earth, passed across the face of its star, casting a shadow toward watchful telescopes here. 2 decades later, transits have become the lifeblood of exoplanet studies, yielding thousands of worlds via space. All right, so what they're saying is they can see the shadow of whatever moon it is around a star. They can see the shadow. Now, wait a minute. Think about this. The closest star, we're talking a long, long ways away. And if you look at the moons around Saturn, you only see a speck of light. All right? If you're looking at a moon, not a planet, a moon that is in our solar system, and all you see is a speck of light. So if it's just a speck, and it's way beyond the planets in the solar system, and it's going around a star, which all we're seeing as a star is a little white, bright light. It's the source of the light, and the planet is going around the source. So how could the planet be making a shadow on this light, which is the source? That planet wouldn't cast a shadow on that star, because in order for it to cast a shadow, there would have to be a light between that planet and the Earth. But the light that's shining in that area is that star on the other side. It can't cast a shadow. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not understanding what they're saying. But again, it just seems like they make up these things just to try to make it make sense. But in reality, they got nothing. They got nothing. So I looked up what is the temperature of the heliosphere, which is the area just beyond Pluto. What's called the Wall of Fire. And it says, by contrast, the fast solar wind has a typical velocity of 750 kilometers per second, a temperature of 8 times 105 Kelvin, and it nearly matches the composition of the sun's photosphere. Hence, with 1 million Kelvin, we get a good estimate of the average temperature of the heliosphere. 1 million degrees Kelvin. Just how hot is 1 million degrees Kelvin? Well, it's the same. That'd be about 1 million degrees Celsius. Let me show you. If you write in 1 million Kelvin equals 1,799,540 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's about 1 million degrees Celsius. Now, how hot do you have it to melt metal? Well, I looked that up, and it says the melting point of a metal depends on its atomic structure, but it can range from 1,371 Celsius to 1,593 Celsius. So that's 1,400 Celsius. That will melt metal. But this heliosphere is 1 million degrees Celsius. So you can see the problem here. They supposedly have a metal probe flying through there right now. I'm just saying, I don't know. Somehow or another, this doesn't make any sense. Now, I'm sure if you ask somebody at NASA, they'd say, oh, well, it's because, do. I don't know. But I don't know how you could deflect the heat away, maybe have air conditioners on board. I mean, look, there's no way that I can imagine that they have any kind of technology to put a force field like Star Trek has so they could go through these walls of fire. Star Trek talks about it and says we can't get through unless we got a force field. They already were talking about that in the 80s and 70s. They knew that. Now, supposedly, they're doing it. They're going through there when we ain't got no force field around this thing. So how in the last 30 years have they figured out how to make a force field? And if they've made a force field, why haven't they told us about it? I don't think they made a force field because we don't have a technology to make force fields. So even if we have technology now, which we don't, we certainly didn't 20, 30 years ago when they sent this thing off. So the whole thing sounds fishy to me. Here's something that blow your mind. You've heard about the Van Allen belt and people asking how could the Apollo spacecraft get through the Van Allen belt if it's a radiation belt that humans could not survive? Well, they've said, well, there's a weak spot somewhere and they went through it real quick, or I don't know how they explained it. But now, notice this. The Van Allen belt can get up to 20,000 degrees Kelvin, which is like 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit. 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really hot. So forget about the radiation that would cook you internally, right? We're not just talking about being so hot from the outside, heat radiating out, from the sun. But we're talking about radiation that's going right through the metal, literally melting it from the inside out. The heat alone is 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, what did we say was the temperature you needed to melt metals? Remember this? 1,371 Celsius, or 1,593 Celsius, between there. But the Van Allen belt is 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way hotter than just 1,000 degrees, right? This is like 20, 30 times hotter. So how did they get Apollo through the Van Allen belt if it's between 20 and 35,000 degrees? That's ridiculous. Now, there are things that we don't know, right? But one thing I do know, beyond a doubt, is that you cannot get a piece of metal that melts at 1,500 degrees to not melt at 35,000 degrees. It is going to melt, and you can't protect it in any possible way unless you could make a force field like Star Trek, which I know they didn't do. So I guarantee, for that one reason alone, they've lied about the moon landing. We didn't go to the moon. We didn't even make a rocket go through the Van Allen belt, let alone a manned rocket or a monkey rocket. Nobody went through the Van Allen belt. No, nothing. It's an impenetrable belt that you cannot get through. No human will ever get through the Van Allen belt, let alone the heliosphere. You cannot get through it. You cannot leave this solar system. But not only that, you can't leave the Earth's atmosphere and get beyond the Van Allen belt to go beyond the moon. You cannot leave Earth. It is impossible, friends. And that means that they're really hoaxing this, because if they can go on television and lie and say they landed on the moon when they didn't, and they have all this fake B quality movie film that they supposedly filmed going to the moon, just looking at this fake film, anyone could tell that it's fake. But everybody just sat there and believed it. During the 60s, I don't think anybody said, oh, this is fake. And why didn't Russia say something? Hey, guys, this is fake. You guys are faking it. Why you didn't go to the moon, right? You know why? Because they were faking it too. But here's the thing. If they're faking it and we're faking it, then don't you think that these nuclear bombs are fake too? We don't have any. Yeah, we don't have any nuclear weapons. It's all a big fake threat. That's why they got the little rocket man blowing up these little missiles into the air. Look at, oh my goodness, they've got nuclear. Scary. Oh, we need more tax dollars to build more weapons so we can protect ourselves from the little rocket man. And finally, guys, if all of that's not blow your mind enough, we're going to postulate this a little further. And we're going to come to a conclusion that just might change your whole concept of reality and flip your whole life on its end and make you start thinking and rethinking everything you've ever thought about anything. And it might just be a life-changing event. But we postulated it all up to this point. Now you can go back over it a couple times and see if we were accurate. Maybe I left something out. Maybe I'm wrong. But if we're right up to this point, and they've been lying to us about all of this, then that means that Russia and the United States are both in it together. And China. And India. And every other government on the face of the earth. And that means that whoever runs the governments is this family or this little group or this Masonic cult or, something where it's just all a big hoax. And Russia's not the bad guy. Think about it. If the United States and Russia and China are all in on it, then this whole thing over there in Taiwan, it's all a big scam. They're all working together for the one world government to be brought. You hear about the BRICS. Oh, that's from the Russians and the Chinese and the Brazilians, and they're all, doing the BRICS, and that's against the U.S. And no, they're all doing it together. We gave Iran billions of dollars so they would strike Israel, and now Israel's about to strike Iran. We're at DEFCON 1. They're doing it all together in unison. Little rocket man is just to scare us all so that we'll have to give more of our tax dollars to the governments. They're not doing anything. Little paper ships floating around and telling us that they're very expensive. They have all these powers and aliens are coming. All this is probably a lie. They probably are just spoofing us. What's the next one going to be? They're going to have some kind of UFO alien landing disclosure. It's pretty obvious that this disclosure is being used as a propaganda psyop upon the world because they're saying they're interdimensional beings. You know what that means? They don't have physical bodies, just demons. Friends, I'd say we better wake up. It's coming. Be prepared. You got Tucker Carlson on there every diggity dang dong day saying, hey, they're going to pull the plug any minute. They're going to pull the plug. And we're not prepared. And everybody's going to die. They warned you. It's coming real soon. I suspect war between the United States, Russia, China, or whatever, Israel, Iran, very soon. Like within weeks. Banks could go down. A lot of things could go down here pretty quick. Be prepared, friends. I love you all. May the Lord bless you, and He will. We'll see you tomorrow.